I was stunned when an HOA patrol invaded my condo and Karen's schemes turned every neighborly nuisance into a full-blown personal attack. Will I be able to reclaim my sanctuary before it vanishes forever? Welcome to our channel. Please subscribe if you want more Karen and HOA stories. I remember the night it all began. The night my quiet condo turned into a stage for something I never thought would happen. In the first few seconds, I heard the low hum of a car engine. Outside my door, a sound that quickly grew into an omen of the trouble to come. I was sitting in my favorite chair, reading a book about local property laws, when the sound of footsteps echoed down the hallway. I paused, feeling a chill, wondering if this was just my imagination or the start of something big. I had always believed in fairness and the power of knowing my rights. I spent many evenings studying property maps and legal books, trying to learn every rule that kept my home safe. But I never thought that the rules themselves would be used against me. That night, my mind raced as I tried to recall every fact I had learned. Suddenly, the doorbell rang, a sharp, clear sound that broke my concentration and my calm. I walked slowly to the door, my heart pounding, and peered through the peephole to see two uniformed people standing outside. Their faces were serious, and their presence felt heavy, like a cloud passing over a sunny day. I opened the door with a steady voice, asking, "Can I help you?" Their eyes met mine, and I could see that this was not a friendly visit. They introduced themselves as part of the HOA patrol. I felt a knot in my stomach because I was not a member of this special patrol group. I explained in simple, clear words that I was just a resident trying to keep my home peaceful, but their tone was firm and unyielding. Before I could fully understand what was happening, a familiar figure stepped into view, a neighbor known as Karen. Karen's eyes were cold and her smile was far from kind. I had seen her before, always acting like she was better than everyone else, always ready to enforce her own strict ideas about how things should be done. Karen said in a loud, commanding voice, "You must follow these rules, whether you like it or not." Her words hit me hard, like a sudden storm on a clear day. I felt confused and upset. I asked calmly, "What rules are you talking about?" But she only laughed and waved a finger at the officers, as if my question was silly. In that moment, I felt like I was caught in the middle of a fight I did not start. I knew then that this was not just about a simple misunderstanding over quiet hours or a misplaced complaint. It was much more, and it was coming from someone I had once thought was just a neighbor. I decided to stand my ground, drawing on all the research I had done over the past months. I reminded myself that I had studied the property maps, learned the rights of every homeowner, and even followed the local news about HOA rules. I felt a small spark of hope. I knew that I was not powerless. I asked the officers, in a soft but steady voice, "Why are you here if I am not part of your patrol?" Their response was vague, and left many questions hanging in the air. They mentioned something about a review of property, rules, and a special visit to check on residents. I listened carefully, my mind racing with the details I had learned from books and newspapers. I knew that every rule had a reason, but I also knew that sometimes people could twist those rules to hurt others. Karen's smirk grew wider as she watched me struggle with my questions. I noticed that she held a set of papers, almost like a script, ready to use at any moment. In the dim light of the hallway, those papers looked like a weapon she was prepared to use against me. I took a deep breath and asked, "Can you show me which rules I'm breaking?" My voice was calm, even as I felt the weight of the situation pressing down on me. Karen glanced at the papers and then back at me, her eyes flashing with anger. "You are in violation of our community standards," she declared, her tone final and unyielding. I felt a surge of determination mixed with fear. I knew I needed to get every detail down, so I reached for my phone to record what was happening. I wasn't sure if this was allowed, but I had learned from my research that recording such interactions could protect my rights. The officers seemed to ignore my action, and Karen's eyes narrowed, as if warning me to stop. But I continued, my hands steady, trying to capture every word she spoke. I felt like I was in a scene from a movie, a scene where the hero stands up against an overwhelming force. I remembered all the time. I had spent learning about my rights and the rules that were meant to protect me, not to be used as a tool for bullying. I asked more questions, each one simple and clear, hoping to understand the true reason behind this visit. The officers, however, only repeated vague statements about inspections and community welfare. I knew something was not right. My gut told me that Karen had a plan, one that went beyond the simple enforcement of rules. As the minutes passed, my thoughts turned to the many nights I had spent poring over property maps and legal documents. I had learned about the importance of due process and fairness. I recalled a case study I had read about a neighbor who used media exposure to fight back against unjust rules. That thought gave me courage. I thought, maybe I can use all this knowledge to help me now. I promised myself that I would not back down easily. Even though I was only one person, I believed that truth and fairness could shine a light on dark corners. Karen's words, however, continued to echo in my mind. She said, "This is for the good of our community," as if that explained everything. But I knew that sometimes people say things for their own benefit, not for the truth. I felt a strong urge to dig deeper into the papers she held. I asked again, in a gentle but firm tone, "Can you show me the part that says I must follow these rules?" My question was met with a sneer. Karen waved her hand dismissively, and one of the officers said, "You will see it later." That answer left me with more questions than answers. I decided then that I needed to learn every detail of these so-called rules. I promised myself to visit the local town office the next day, to look at the maps and the documents that outlined our property rights. I wanted to know if Karen's claims had any real weight or if she was just using them to scare people like me. I knew that if I understood the law, I could fight back in a way that was smart and calm. In that first encounter, my heart pounded with worry and determination. I wondered how many times I would have to defend my home against those who claimed to protect it. I thought about all the quiet nights before this, when I simply believed in a safe community. Now, with Karen and her gang of officers making their rounds, everything seemed uncertain. I wanted to know what was next. I wanted to understand how someone could turn simple rules into a weapon against a peaceful neighbor. That night, as I sat back down in my chair, I took out my notebook and began to write everything I remembered. Every word Karen had said, every look on the officers' faces, it all mattered. I started making notes about the time, the place, and even the sound of Karen's dismissive laughter. I knew that details were important. I even made a rough sketch of the hallway and where each person had stood. I hoped that by doing this, I would not forget a single piece of the puzzle. I also decided to look online for similar stories. I searched for news about HOA patrols and unfair treatment of homeowners. To my surprise, I found many stories that sounded just like mine. Reading them gave me a bit of hope. I saw that I was not alone and that many others had stood up against similar problems. I felt a spark of solidarity, even though I was still afraid of what might come next. Every time I read another story, I wondered if I was heading down the same dangerous road. I thought about how simple disputes could turn into major confrontations when one person, like Karen, pushed too hard. I felt a mix of sadness and anger at how easily our peaceful lives could be disturbed. But I also felt a strong sense of purpose. I knew that if I gathered enough evidence, my calm and reasonable approach could win over the truth. I had the knowledge, and I was ready to use it. Even as I planned my next steps, a small worry nagged at me. What if Karen had more tricks up her sleeve? What if this was only the beginning of a long battle? I realized that I must be careful and patient. I closed my notebook with a quiet promise to myself that I would do everything I could to protect my home. I was determined to fight this injustice with the tools I had learned: research, maps, and a clear understanding of my legal rights. That night, as I drifted off to sleep, my thoughts were full of questions. I knew I had to be brave, even if it meant facing an overbearing and entitled neighbor like Karen. I could only hope that tomorrow would bring new clues to solve this puzzle, and that with every new piece of evidence, I would be closer to finding the truth behind her harsh words. My mind buzzed with plans for the next day, plans that would lead me to the local office, to the property maps, and to a search for the legal details that Karen had so carelessly dismissed. I lay in bed, listening to the quiet hum of the night, and I felt a mix of fear and hope. I wondered if I could truly stand up to such powerful forces without losing the peace I so cherished. The quiet of my condo now felt like a fragile bubble, waiting to burst, and as I closed my eyes, the memory of that fateful doorbell rang over and over in my mind, a reminder that sometimes the most ordinary moments can hide the start of an extraordinary battle. I woke up that morning with a racing heart, knowing that something big was about to happen. The letter from Karen still burned in my mind as I sat down at my little table with my laptop, a stack of printed maps, and a pile of condo rules. I had to show that I was right and that the rules were fair, even if Karen, with her loud and overbearing ways, thought she could bend them to hurt me. I started my day by looking up every rule and law that mentioned my condo rights. I searched on the internet and even visited the local library. I learned that the maps I had printed showed exactly where my property ended. Every line on the paper was a proof that I could not be pushed around. I wrote down all the facts in simple words so that I could remember them later, and I even made a list of questions to ask a friendly lawyer I had heard about in my neighborhood. Later that morning, while I was carefully reading a document about property rights, there was a loud knock on my door. I opened it to find one of the HOA patrol officers standing there, with a serious look on his face. He handed me another letter, one that warned me to fix a noise issue. Even though I knew I wasn't the one making any noise, I took a deep breath, my heart pounding, and explained that I was busy checking the rules. I promised him that I would look into it, but even as he left, I knew that Karen's plans were getting worse. That evening, I received a surprising phone call from Lisa, a neighbor who usually kept to herself. In a soft whisper, she told me that she had seen Karen, talking very sternly to someone from the HOA board. Lisa explained that Karen was trying to push for rules that would hurt people, like me who did not follow her ideas. I listened carefully, feeling the mix of fear and determination rise inside me. I asked her to tell me every detail and promised that I would keep her secret safe. This call was the first hook that made me see I was not alone in this fight. The next day, I started to gather more proof. I went door to door and met several neighbors who had similar stories. Some of them had written down notes and even taken photos of strange signs or messages left by Karen's supporters. I made copies of these notes and stored them safely with my other research. Every story they shared was a tiny piece of evidence that showed that Karen was using the HOA rules in a very unfair way. I spent hours looking at the property, maps, and marking them with bright colors to show the clear boundaries of my condo. I used a red pen to mark the exact line that separated my home from the common areas that the HOA could control. With every mark, I felt a little more sure of my rights. I drew simple diagrams so that even someone who was not used to reading maps could understand them. It was like putting together a puzzle where every piece told me that I was in the right. I also called a kind lawyer who lived not far from my condo. He sat down with me and explained in simple words how the law worked and that I had every right to defend my space. He helped me write a letter to the HOA board. In that letter, I asked for a fair look at the rules and a stop to the unfair actions that Karen was leading. His calm voice and clear words made me feel that I was not alone. Every piece of advice he gave was like a strong hook that pulled me further into the fight for justice. Then one day, while I was working on my notes, I found a note under my door that read, "Leave this alone if you value your home." My hands shook as I read the words, and I quickly took a picture of the note. I added it to my growing collection of evidence. I knew that this was a sign that Karen was ready to do anything to keep her control. Even though the note scared me, I did not let it stop me. Instead, I worked even harder to build my case. I started sharing my findings on a small blog and on social media. I posted pictures of the maps, scanned copies of the legal documents, and short videos explaining what I had learned. I kept the words simple and clear, so that even a fourth grader could understand what was happening. I wanted everyone to know that the rules were made to protect us, not to scare us. Every new comment and message from neighbors gave me the strength to continue. As the days went by, my story began to catch the eye of local news reporters. One reporter called me for an interview, asking simple questions about what was happening in our condo. I explained how Karen was using the rules to control us, even though I was just trying to live peacefully in my home. I spoke slowly and clearly, making sure that every word was easy to understand. The reporter promised to look into it, and I felt a surge of hope knowing that more people were learning the truth. One evening, as I was going over all my papers and notes, I received an email from someone who claimed to have more proof against Karen. Attached to the email was a copy of the transcript from a recent HOA board meeting. In that transcript, Karen had spoken very harshly and tried to convince the board to support new rules that would hurt people like me. I read every word carefully, feeling my heart beat faster with each sentence. I added the transcript to my collection, knowing that it was a very important piece of evidence. Every new day brought fresh challenges, but also more clues that pointed to the truth. I continued my research, talking to more neighbors and checking the maps and legal texts again and again. I kept some of my findings hidden, knowing that I would need them for the right moment. Each piece of evidence I collected was like a hook that kept the story moving forward, a sign that the truth would soon win. Even when the pressure grew, I kept my voice calm and steady. I reminded myself of all the clear facts in the maps and the written rules. I also remembered the kind words from the lawyer and the brave stories of my neighbors. Together, all of this made me feel strong and determined. I knew that I was standing up not just for myself, but for everyone who believed in fairness and peace in our community. I kept my work simple and honest. I made sure that every word, every picture, and every note was clear. I wrote down every meeting and every phone call so that no detail was lost. I wanted to be ready for the next step when I would share my final proof with the HOA board and the community. Even though the road was long and hard, I felt like every small victory was a step toward a better future. I did not know what would happen next. Would the HOA board listen to us? Could I really stop Karen's unfair rules from taking over our community? These questions spun in my mind every day, but I held on to hope. I believed that with truth on my side, I could protect my home and help my neighbors feel safe again. Each piece of evidence, each phone call from a friend, and each letter I wrote added strength to my case. In the quiet moments of the night, when I looked at the simple maps on my wall, I felt like I was following a treasure map that would lead me to justice. Even though Karen tried to scare me with her harsh words and secret meetings, I knew that I was on the right path. Every new piece of evidence was like a light shining on the truth, showing me that I was not alone and that I was ready to fight back. I kept moving forward with care and determination, knowing that the truth would outshine any fear. Every call, every meeting, and every bit of research was a hook that made me more determined to stand up for my rights. I looked forward to the next day, wondering what new proof I would find and how my neighbors would join in to make our voices heard. I did not let Karen's threats make me doubt myself. Instead, I used all the tools I had, my maps, my notes, my lawyer's advice, and even the help of local reporters, to build a strong case. I kept my heart calm and my mind clear, even as I faced each new challenge. I was ready to show everyone that the truth was on our side and that no one should be bullied out of their home. I kept my hope alive with every new fact and every friendly word from those who believed in fairness. And even as the fight grew harder, I knew that each new hook in the story would bring us closer to a day when justice would finally win. I started my day with a deep breath, knowing that today could change everything. The past weeks had been a blur of worry, meetings, and countless hours spent poring over property maps and legal books. I had even taken photos and videos to show the truth. As I walked through the hallways of my condo, I could feel eyes on me and whispers trailing behind every corner. My heart raced with both fear and hope. I knew I had to stand firm and clear the fog that Karen had cast over our community. I had collected so much evidence that it was hard to believe. I showed my research to a kind lawyer who explained my rights in simple words. I used maps of our property to point out where I lived and why. I was safe from the overbearing rules Karen had twisted. It was like a puzzle coming together. Every new piece of evidence made my case stronger, and every step I took pushed back against Karen's unfair grip. Before long, I arranged a small meeting with a few neighbors, who had also felt Karen's harsh rule. We gathered in our common room, where I shared the research, the maps, and even the legal advice I had received. The room filled with quiet excitement and cautious hope as we saw that Karen's control was not absolute. My voice was calm and steady, and I reminded everyone that we deserved fairness. With each word, I could see their doubts fade, replaced by determination. Then came the twist. A local news reporter heard our story and wanted to cover it. As the camera rolled, I explained in simple terms how Karen had used the HOA rules to make life difficult for many of us. The questions the reporter asked were honest, and each answer helped shine a light on the truth. In that moment, I realized that our small fight was becoming a larger call for justice. I could see Karen's eyes narrow from across the room as she sensed the tide turning. I left that meeting feeling stronger than ever. My research, my maps, and my voice had created a ripple of change. Even as Karen planned her next move, I knew I was not alone. Every step forward was a step away from fear. Could this be the start of a new, fairer way for all of us?